So hi everybody, I'm Kathy Clark. I'm faculty director for CASE and the director of our CASE I3 Initiative on Impact Investing. It's been a great day and we have one of the best for last here. It is my distinct pleasure to be the one introducing our final keynote speaker of the day, Clara Miller, who has been working to chisel scale and effectiveness from the raw stone of nonprofit, social entrepreneurship, and impact investing fields for a very long time, before I even set foot into them. Clara is, in a word, she's going to be embarrassed by this, maybe not, a powerhouse. You will wonder when you see her how this could be possible. Her eloquence and thoughtfulness will charm you, but do not let her exterior fool you. As you will soon learn, she is a rebel. And if I can say it, she's the best kind, a rebel with a cause. Her cause is to use her vision, intellect, and charm to lead change among some of the most intransigent institutions in society, with the singular goal of helping capital accomplish more good for those who need it most. When Clara turns her attention to institutional practices and norms, she is laser sharp. She identifies barriers most of us don't see, and she peels them back layer by layer. She did it last night as we were having dinner. I saw it. I'd already written this and thought, there it is again. Many people may know that community development finance was the first domain of impact investing in the United States. Our current community development financing system is an example of deliberately incentivizing private actors to invest for public good. The system incentivizes banks to invest in under-resourced communities, fosters a sophisticated network of organizations and practitioners who excel at revitalizing places where others deem investment too risky. But I bet many of you don't know that the federal support of this system, which encompasses billions of dollars and has helped create millions of new jobs in low-income communities, would likely not exist without Clara's leadership. In 1996, she was appointed by President Clinton to the U.S. Treasury's first Community Development Advisory Board for the then newly created Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. She later became its chair. She chaired the Opportunity Finance Network Board for 6 years and was a member of the Community Advisory Committee of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York for 8 years. Most recently, Clara served as president of the Heron Foundation from 2011 through 2017 with the mission of helping people and communities help themselves out of poverty. She helped the foundation demonstrate, which we talked a lot about at the impact investing session just a little while ago, about how it could use all of its assets to drive its mission, not just the 5% conventionally used for grant making. She's promised today to share some of her lessons from this work, and I cannot wait to hear them. She'll speak for part of the time, and then we'll open the floor to Q&A, so be ready with your own sharp questions, and please join me in welcoming my admired and rebellious colleague, Clara Miller.
I'll stand or else I won't be able to see a thing. Good morning. Good morning. God, that's a great way to start. You know, somebody had a picture of this poster, this picture, and showed it to me and said, "Is this you?" I said, "No, this is the color version." But my husband tells me that this makes me look like a Bulgarian prison guard. Which kind of goes with, you know, I want to be powerful and rebellious. Well, maybe not so much rebellious, but at any rate. Thank you, Kathy, for that incredibly generous introduction. And I'm thrilled to be here and also cognizant of the fact that I am between us and cocktails, and therefore I will try to be quick and brief and go powering through this. I entitled my speech, "A Revolution of Capital." And what the heck do I mean by that? Isn't that kind of a contradiction in terms? I mean, you know, aren't revolutions supposed to be for the dispossessed, the peasants versus the aristocracy, or the taxed and unrepresented versus the autocrats, and of course, labor versus capital? And why would capital, AKA investors and owners, want to revolt anyway? Suffice it to say that the world has changed, and many of the sessions that I was privileged to be in this afternoon are very great and ample evidence that it has changed. We've outgrown, business as usual has outgrown our own cherished assumptions very quickly. Technology and globalization have opened our world well beyond our easy reach, and the effects, both for better and for worse, have been unpredictable, interactive, and systemic, not deliberate, successive, and linear, or even sometimes planar. Old institutions and assumptions developed for the latter are unfit to cope with climate change, degradation of natural resources, extra-legal armed global networks, and widespread and growing inequality, to name just a few of the wicked interactive problems that we're facing. We don't have to remind ourselves it's depressing. Hence the need to seek revolution in atypical places. We know that revolution, change, begins with a questioning of cherished assumptions. So if the economy needs a reset, one reset might be we can no longer afford us versus them. We can no longer have the luxury of revolting against something. To quote Walt Kelly's Pogo, and I realize that most of you, probably most of your parents weren't born when Walt Kelly's Pogo comic strip was out. But he was an environmentalist, and he said, and Pogo famously was quoted saying, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." Instead, we must create a different kind of revolution where we revolt not against something, but with something, capital of all kinds, financial, social, natural, civic, to move us away from these huge shared risks. Hence, a revolution of capital. I'm going to tell a story today of working to foment a revolution of capital based on my experience with the Heron Foundation, as Kathy said, over the past 6 years. From 2011, when I became its president, to now, when I am now President Emerita, as of the end of last year. In doing so, I hope to highlight the possibilities of economic reinvention from the vantage point of just one type of institution, the private foundation, which is both dedicated to a philanthropic mission and is an investor in public and private markets. For those not familiar with the Heron Foundation or with private foundations, Heron, as Kathy said, our mission is to help people and communities help themselves out of poverty here in the US, which is a somewhat different market than the global market. Our total assets are around 300 million, which is not as big as All Outdoors, as we know. And the typical private foundation is created by a single gift from a generous individual. The gift then becomes what is called an endowment, and 100% of that endowment is conventionally invested for what managers and advisors confidently assure the foundation will be maximum return and minimum risk. Each year, a minimum of 5% of the asset value is spent for qualifying grants and operating assumptions per IRS regulations. This particular business model has been called a hedge fund with a small giving program welded onto the side of it. It is not exactly all assets for mission. Yet from Heron's point of view, as we know, this business model leaves much to be desired. It leaves on the shelf one of the foundation's key distinguishing strengths as an enterprise, the ability to approach all forms of commerce with social benefit in mind. Why would they pull out the endowment from giving? What's that about? It implies that the world is a place where somehow doing social good and investing, or even operating a conventional business, are not only fundamentally incompatible, but in some way mutually toxic. And that culture pervades and dominates philanthropic institutions today. I don't live in that world, and I don't think anybody lives in that world. Those two worlds are not separate. Heron never accepted that construct, in fact, in its history. Long before I showed up in 2011. Heron was a pioneer social investor, and many of you, as early as 1995, the Heron board was questioning the tidy universe of the private foundation. A 2003 publication about Heron's social investing quotes a board member as saying, "Should a private foundation be more than a private investment company that uses some of its excess cash flow for charitable purposes?" And some of you, I was about to say, some of you in this room will remember my predecessor, Sharon King, and Luther Reagan, who was the chief investment officer, who really led the charge down the road. Heron had decided that the answer was a resounding yes. By the time I arrived in 2011, Heron had aligned 40% of its endowment assets with its mission, which, by the way, why 40%? Well, there was a McKinsey study, of course, that said, that said this is the maximum that a foundation can invest in alignment with good things before the dread spend down starts to occur and its capital is whittled away and it goes out of business. And that, you know, we want perpetuity, whatever that is these days. So what did we do with that 40% for mission? Well, one of the, we did lots of, I think, very creditable things. We invested to help families get access to home ownership through mortgages, access to financing, provide access to financing for business to expand and individuals to get access to training, which would lead to jobs. And these investments and programs did some good, without a doubt. But in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, we had to admit that some things had gone awry. While our portfolio of community development debt, which included North Carolina's self-help, and I know there are some folks here who are from a part of self-help, performed better during the financial crisis than any other asset in our portfolio. It was by far, those community development loans just tooted along at 4% for the entire time of the financial crisis, while everything else was completely in the tank. The rest of our portfolio and the portfolios around us mirrored the economy as a whole. And behind the charts of plunging investment returns, the human story, of course, was truly calamitous. Investment returns were beside the point. The 2008 crisis led to the greatest stripping of assets from the poor in American history. For a foundation whose mission was helping people and communities help themselves out of poverty, this was equally calamitous. The idea that as the stock market recovered, then wealth inequality grew. Those people, those losses, have never recovered. And contrary to expectations, economic recovery made our anti-poverty mission more relevant than ever. We admitted that our strategy of helping people get access to assets, the most prevalent approach to poverty alleviation in the sector at that time, was helpful but not adequate. If the economy was unreliable and not providing adequate livelihood, the central assumption behind an access strategy was flawed. Thus, we further concluded the accepted view that American poverty was somehow the result of temporary market failures for a small and declining percentage of the population not only was false, but it had been bad for a long time. This was contradicted by decades of experience of decline. The sobering reality we faced, of course, was that the market failure, the temporary market failure that philanthropy was expected to address and nonprofit organizations to address, in this case, was in the market economy itself. At that juncture, the path, of course, became clearer. We had to up our game. The private foundation business model, as I alluded to before, is not built to be all in, that is, to position its assets, human and financial, as potential change agents to achieve mission. To the contrary, as I noted before, it exemplifies the idea that investing in social benefit are somehow fundamentally incompatible, and that a philanthropic model that toes this line has the best, or more accurately, the only chance of succeeding at helping the world. The separation of good program from good investing defines philanthropy as not only separate from, but somehow needing protection from the rest of the economy. And in this parallel universe, a small cleanup crew of nonprofits and social enterprises gets grants and possibly even loans and solves problems, while a much larger complement of mainstream for-profit companies, investees, remember, of 100% of foundations' assets, run rampant with license to create the problems the program side is meant to solve. How can this be sustainable? How can we accept this? We decided we had to push beyond this model, beyond marginal and toward fundamental philanthropy, which we started calling FullFrontal Philanthropy, which was fun, where we as a foundation saw the entire foundation as an active participant in the economy, not what I call a terrarium, somehow protected people with their teddy bears and dolls and picnics talking about impact, but opening that terrarium to say, we are going to position ourselves in the whole economy. The operative financial question became, what is the best use of a Heron dollar or a Heron asset, whether it's financial or human capital, for any dollar for mission? What is the best use of this dollar for mission? We had to, in Gandhi's words, be the change we hope to see. And our first steps toward this change, the revolution of capital, would be to develop new ways to structure and operate our business, reinventing the foundation business model itself so it would be fit for purpose. We moved that forward with some fundamental, tangible resets, which I will recount. First, we embraced the idea that all investing is impact investing. I'm often asked, are other foundations doing impact investing? And I like to say, everybody's doing impact investing. We just don't know whether the impact is good or bad. Much of what they're doing may be bad or good, we just don't know. And we combined these into one unit. You have to understand that in a conventional foundation, they are kept apart. I don't even think, at the holiday party, with lampshades on their heads, they kind of meet and get drunk together. They are actually rarely cross paths. And we combined everybody, grant makers and investors, into one unit to deploy our capital to any legal form of business in alignment with mission. We changed our investment policy statement to explicitly apply our fiduciary duty as a private foundation of obedience to mission to all of our funds, not just the grant making, but the investing as well. We took a broader view of risk, including beneficiary risk, as material to our investment policy. And we explicitly looked through the asset class down to the enterprise level, because that's where impact happens. Asset classes may have some impact characteristics, but if you look at the enterprise level, that's where it's happening. They are the drivers of impact. We set as a goal investing 100% of our capital, our financial capital, in alignment with our mission, moving beyond 40%. As of fiscal year end 2016, we had screened and aligned 100%, and now the job is to optimize. We are well aware we have to keep a weather eye on the integrity of the ideas driving impact investing, investing for good, whatever anybody wants to call it. As big players have come into the impact investing pool, the potential damage of marketing wrappers and outright fraud mounts. Heron has invested in developing and maintaining rigorous, comparable data, standards, and reporting in the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, in most recently the Impact Management Project, and in a variety of other frameworks and networks. I will say we have to have good data standards. FASB and SASB start with data standards Then we go to materiality for SASB and FASB, and maybe some form of that beyond SASB and FASB, which are, I realize, idiotic sounding, but there is rigor in those standards, and there's industry verticals. There are a variety of ways that those enterprises can become comparable. That's how we move markets. We can't move markets with investors making up their own measurements. We just can't. We have, I don't know how I became passionate about accounting. I was an art major in college. Something happened to me. We have intentionally positioned ourselves in and not outside the economy and the market. We cannot succeed alone. The $300 million, I mean, this is a rounding error on a rounding error on a rounding error in the New York City economy in one day, right? So we've worked alongside others to influence not only foundations, but sovereign wealth funds and pension funds, investors with much more scale and heft than foundations, investors who are actually able to change the nature of markets and enterprises. Only 5 years ago, impact investing was a small outlier. Today, as many have mentioned during the excellent sessions I saw, Bain, KKR, BlackRock, State Street Global Advisors, and many others are coming into the game. And I'm going to reread some of Larry Fink's comments that Kathy mentioned. He, CEO of BlackRock, which had $6 trillion or something thereabouts, but who's counting it, $1 trillion, right? Is under management, is the largest asset management firm in the world. His letter, which speaks volumes, and Kathy's was better and had more, to prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes a positive contribution to society. Companies must benefit all of their stakeholders, including shareholders, employees, customers, and the communities in which they operate, and so on. Brave world. Our job is to cheer him on and to hold him to it, and to find out how to hold him to it. To sum up, we harbor no illusion at Heron of being a unique prophetic voice in American philanthropy, or that our sector can be the lone hero with a silver bullet against social ills. When preventing problems in the mainstream arguably is more important than solving them in the social sector. Poverty, climate change, violence are systemic, geographically unbounded, multi-sector. We must have everyone in the game. Muscular big public companies, private equity firms, small business, nonprofits, government, individuals. Philanthropy is a way of life. It's not an afterthought or something apart to be done tomorrow outside of work or business. It's the way we live our lives, invest capital, and do business today in real time. If we can do that, we'll be truly revolutionary. Thank you.
So Claire, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then we'll open it up for some more. You saw a disconnect in the structure and behavior of this institution that is basically given public license to operate. It's one thing to see that disconnect. It's another thing to actually change behavior. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in terms of barriers that you faced,
right? How
you learned to basically push people to think and do things completely differently, yeah. and what lessons, because there's a lot of people in this room trying to do that in many other contexts.
Yep. It's such a great question, and I can tell you, it ain't over till it's over. Culture change, it's culture eats strategy for breakfast, we all know that. But we decided to start from technology, and when I say that, investment vehicles are technology. Enterprise finance is technology. Enterprises, businesses, and business models are really technology to turn you know, to turn something into something else of greater value, hopefully. So it seemed kind of unthreatening to change the business model, even though it sounded just like a dog's dinner, right? And the hardest thing was that, you know, when we changed the business model and we said, you know, ta-da, now that we don't have any more program officers and we don't have any more programs and we don't have any more of this and that.
It sounds like chaos. Did they see it? Did your staff see that?
Well, luckily we're quite small. I mean, if Darren Walker did that at the Ford Foundation, he would probably have open armed revolt, you know, around the globe. But what it did was, and Heron had been on this path before, so it wasn't a wild shock. But what we found was that grantees, were really kind of perturbed. It was sort of like, just tell us what you want us to do to get money. Stop with all this. Well, we've decided to create a new kind of financial instrument called philanthropic equity, and if you're going through something, they were just like, oh God, what will they think up to torture us with next? You know, is there no end to foundations, you know, sadistic practice? And on the other side, inside the foundation, of course, all these people are saying, wait a minute, this is ego candy this is crack. This is ego crack. I get to go to these meetings and everybody thinks I'm really wonderful and cute and, you know, funny and all these other things, and I never was before. And it's because they want your money. And so, I mean, so it's very hard, even though everybody's saying yes. You know, there's that Jack Welch quote. It was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal when he went to GE and he tried to make culture change. And the quote was, Welsh stymied by Gandhi-like employees. And it was inherent. Of course, we were a small group and everybody was very excited about this. But even that, it was hard. It was hard for me to remember. It was hard for our board to remember. Oh my God, you're different. You know, this is different. We also have these extremely strong cultural myths about how, you know, well, you know, you have to lose money or you're not doing social good. Well, that's really about tax compliance at the foundation, because in fact, if you make a program-related investment, you have to intend not to make money. So the legal guys basically say, well, you know, go and ask your grantees if they could use 0% money over 10 years. And the borrowers, of which I was one at Nonprofit Finance Fund, of course, say to Ford Foundation, yes. Yes, please. Oh, that will make all the difference, or whatever it is. Now, there is a legitimate case for all of those things, but enterprise finance is not in the toolkit of any foundations. So all of those, you know, there were many culture change things, and they're still going on now. It's, you know.
I want to ask one more question, and then I'll open it up. My other question is, you talked a little bit about, you know, Heron is unique. It had a history before you got there of moving in this direction. A lot of the mindset change, I'm sure, at the board level, right, was already was already in process.
Definitely.
And you know, even 5 years ago, I can remember so many people, you can't possibly manage 100% of any portfolio for impact, right? That's just not, whether McKinsey said it or not, it's you know, it's foolish, and there are going to be all these problems. And yet here you have been, you know, on the way up to your 100% and ever since, basically kind of acting as a change agent or a poster child for this within the foundation community. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's been like, what your strategies were, and where you think that is?
Right. I mean, my colleagues were quite perturbed with me. I mean, it was hard for them to, sometimes some of them wouldn't really speak to me, you know. But some of them really were, you know, supporters, and somebody like Darren Walker, actually, and, you know, say what you will.
Darren is the president of the Ford Foundation.
Of the Ford Foundation, exactly.
Which is much larger.
It's much larger, it's much more complicated. It has much more politics than Heron Foundation. And he has actually gone down this road. And I know that his chief investment officer, as soon as Ford announced its billion-dollar, carve-out of its corpus for mission, his chief investment officer, who was not a proponent of this, got a call from his buddies saying, "How did you let this happen?" So these big foundations have different cultures than ours. They have these entrenched investment advisors. They have board members who are investment, it's a very different kettle of fish from the way Heron is. And a lot of therefore, a lot of the kind of progress is happening at smaller foundations, family offices, or on business model reinvention. It's Omidyar, it's Skoll, it's
people who are using different forms, nonprofit, for-profit, hybrids to get different things done.
Why do we need to create this kind of stagnant enterprise?
Well, and the other thing that you guys have done so well is you've been so transparent about what you're doing. And so if you guys are interested in, what does the Heron Foundation invest in, it's actually all over their website.
I decided that it helps to have been outside the foundation world as an intermediary, which was the nonprofit finance fund, which I founded and ran for like 28 years before Anthony Bug-Levine took it over. But I had a front row seat on how foundations operate and what the opportunities were, both in the investing side in a certain way and on their side, and how that the best program officers were ones who could do workarounds of the rules. And I thought, we don't have to be that way. And not only that, there is just this extreme culture of secrecy for things that are mostly boring and that nobody would ever really care about if they knew. So it's really odd. So I decided, well, let's just put it out there and see, if the Earth explodes. And so far it has.
So far, so good. Do we have some questions? Do we have mics? I don't know if you guys have a mic to run up there. Yeah, in the back.
First of all, good afternoon. Claire, I want to thank you for your career, the work that you've done at NFF and the work that you've done at Heron Foundation. I work with the Southeastern Council of Foundations, so we work with foundations across the entire Southeast. And the Heron Foundation has set a very powerful standard for this work that a lot of foundations are trying to emulate and live up to. That being said, as you look out 5 to 10 years from now, if your North Star and dream came true, what are you most hopeful for in the space around impact and ESG investing, if your dream came true?
Wow, that's a very challenging question, and thank you. I think that the nonprofit sector has a very kind of ambivalent business proposition, and I would say foundations are part of that. We have to get strong and do things really well so that little by little, especially in things like health and social services, we make it unnecessary. We eat our market. We reduce the need for our services. You don't really want to scale foster care, right? You really want to do away with the need for it. You don't want to scale, poverty programs. You want to do away with the need for them. So the good outcome is that the private sector, and led by Larry Fink. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it's a more unlikely thing. but that becomes, and aided by blockchain. No,
wearing glasses. So we're all good.
Wearing glasses from Warby Parker. Gets really understands that it's eating its young. It is essentially undermining and it's overfishing its market. And if it doesn't get on the program of sustainability, and I mean social, environmental, you name it, the whole range of sustainability, we aren't going to make it. So I think, so on the one hand, there's this dire part of it, but my good proposition is that, we are all in this together. All enterprises will develop a way to deliver social value, They may falter at times and get better and get worse, but we're on a trajectory that takes everybody up the curve. It doesn't just say, here's a star, we're the best. It says everybody's going up the curve.
That's good vision. Good vision. Mike?
Just a question, about private philanthropies in perpetuity. I think we have sort of an immortality problem, that these institutions are created to sort of live on forever and pay fees to people over that period of time. But how do we get around? Are we due for reform? I think I was looking it up. It was like 1969 that sort of private foundation piece was put in place where you had to distribute 5%. But you see more and more, there's a great transfer of wealth. A lot of it could continue to pool in sort of the private foundation. And what does that mean for society? And, I come from the entrepreneur perspective. I have an urgency to get that capital working.
Right. A great question. I think it is. There's an urgency to get the capital working. I think that it's incumbent, if foundations thought of themselves as enterprises, they'd be saying, and we said to ourselves, what's the timeline on getting this done? How can we actually start investing to help people in communities help themselves out of poverty? And will there be, the Irene Diamond Foundation said, we want to do AIDS research so that we get this done. And they did it, and they spent down. So there have been examples of this. I do think that there's a distinction between spend and invest. If you think about private foundations, and most people think, look at these huge numbers. If you took all of the private foundations in the United States, Gates, whoever, all of them, Ford, Rockefeller, MacArthur, big, small, all of them together, their corpuses are 14 months of the US public school budget. So even if we said, okay, we're going to spend it all tomorrow morning on a cause, none of whom, if you've seen one foundation, you've seen one foundation, as the saying goes, I'm not at all sure it would fix things. However, if you're talking capital, I'm completely in agreement. There is no excuse for a foundation. I think they are in breach of their fiduciary responsibility of obedience to mission if they aren't investing all of their assets for mission and showing the metrics that show how that's working and are constantly on top of that portfolio to make it real. So yes to investing, not so sure to spend down. Perpetuity is a myth. It's just made up by somebody. It doesn't, let's face it, it's less likely to exist now than ever, right?
Another question? Mackenzie, here in the front.
So I was kind of taken by your comment where you said about Larry Fink, like, how do we hold him to this? So I was actually in Washington, D.C. with a group of students visiting some impact investing type organizations when this came out. And I thought, that's really great, but Larry Fink makes this big announcement, and then what? Like, does anything happen? And so as sort of a common person who doesn't have money that is invested in BlackRock, but how do we hold him to that as a community, that he's going to put pressure on the companies he's working with to sort of get on board with social impact?
It is a fundamental question and super important. So I have a saying, and I've already confessed to my passion for accounting, which is accounting is destiny, right? So right now, the public markets don't price social, environmental, and governance risk. They don't recognize it. They don't have accounting for it. But there's an organization called the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, which Heron has invested in and which is tootling along and starting the process of adoption. They use the same process as FASB, and the reason I had that kind of meltdown on the podium about data standards and industry verticals is that we have to get very clear about how we're going to measure material risk to investors and build up from that. Because Larry Fink is not going to be able to tell all these companies whether they're doing okay or they're doing not okay. And we have to make sure we're making the crisp distinction between corporate social responsibility, which is very nice and it's giving grants. It's not evil at all, and it's, you know, it's part of the, I don't know, I think membership card in the human race, frankly. And a business model that has social value built into it, positive social value built into it. And that, if we really do our homework right, we'll be able to start to measure that. And blockchain's going to make it okay. I learned that today.
Well, then we had a successful event.
We're good. It's done. Boom.
So I should probably ask you a last question, Clara. Let me think of one that's fun or interesting. What piece of advice would you like to give to the generation here that we are so blessed to work with every day?
Yes.
And also very hopeful about. What
First of all, thank you. Thank God for you. I mean, seriously, we need you. And I have some folks working at Heron with me and other I actually am the mother of a millennial, or two. Anyway, I think really in this environment, adaptability, not needing to get an A, not expecting there to be any A's given out, staying curious and being flexible is the order of the day. And that on top of these deep skill sets that people were talking about in some of the sessions, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. But at any rate, I'm thrilled that such a talented crew is helping make it good.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please join me. Thank you.
Thank you.